Hi, James here, and I wanted to share with you this really cool project that I'm starting. So, how many of you have done some really cool things over the last few years? Yeah, pretty much everyone. You're going to all be raising your hands. How many of you have kind of thought, I've left something on the table with those cool things that I've been doing over the last few years? Yeah, again, raising your hands. Well, as you know, I was on the radio for almost 12 years doing a nightly talk show called Nightline. Well, this Nightline really became part of me, and this idea of having these great conversations really became part of me. And that's ultimately how Podaholics and what we do in some of my other projects, the James Cast and Podaholics, check them out, www.podaholicswithak.com. All of these things kind of evolved out of that nighttime identity, talk show, having a conversation, etc. Well, from the time that I started doing my nightly stuff to the time that it ended, there were some absolutely spectacular conversations. And what I discovered was that they really are still in my head. Well, yesterday, I was having a conversation, and Ali Mack of Virgin here in the UAE. He was at Virgin, then he went to Lebanon, and then back to England, and then he's back. Go check out Podaholics, and he listened to the podcast with Ali Mack because it was just fantastic. And in fact, Ali and I used to run into each other at night at the Arabian Radio Network studios because the Virgin studio and the Dubai Eye studio were right beside each other. Well, I was having a little discussion yesterday with Ali, and he said, hey, sorry I haven't posted up your podcast that we did and let people know we did it. Well, he did post it up, and then Dan Marsh, none other than Dan Marsh, who was on 92, Dan Marsh, and who's, of course, back in England now, Dan Marsh goes, oh man, it was such a blast from the past, blast from the past to be listening to you and Ali, and what's some great programming? And I said, yeah, I'm no longer on the air, and that kind of makes you wonder what happened and why didn't it? Anyway, whole other story. Well, Dan and I start having a quick little conversation, and it kind of comes. He seeds an idea, and he seeds the idea is, well, what if you had some of that content and you started replaying some of your old content from your nighttime gig from 12 years? Well, I have a whole bunch of that content. And Dan said, and I'm filling this in because it was all in a text, but Dan says, it's kind of like that guy who posts all those old pictures of Dubai. This could be a remembering Dubai thing. And so I literally went to my archive, grabbed the first 5 of them, and started listening. And I realized that this is an archive, a remembering Dubai through Nightline, as there are call-in shows, there are interviews, and there are 12 years of these memories of the United Arab Emirates. So what am I going to do? I'm going to start podcasting them. I'm going to start posting them, remembering Dubai with Nightline. And it really is a celebration of the UAE. It really is a celebration of Dubai. It's just really cool to listen to. So if you were in Dubai or have lived in Dubai in the last 10 years, you're going to find these podcasts interesting. If you have no idea what Dubai is really like and what it's about, you're going to find these podcasts interesting because they're people talking who live here. It's not trying to sell the latest and greatest tourist attraction or things. It's just people talking about their lives in Dubai, and it's kind of fun. And so there we go. That's what we're going to start doing, and I really hope you enjoy it. So how are we starting off, and why am I telling you all of this? I'm starting off by actually posting one of my first forays onto radio here in the UAE with Schroeder Evans. Now, I did this program on the Power Breakfast on 99.3, The Better Mix, back in 2006, 2005. I did this show once a week with Schroeder Evans, and I don't actually have all of them, but I have one. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to post up this 20 minutes to give you a sense of how it all started. And then we're going to start posting up some examples of Dubai, remembering it through Nightline, and we're going to start way back in 2007. So the message here is, one, podcasting is super powerful. I mean, it's a great way to share a story. It's a great way to tell a story. It's a great historical record. So why aren't we all doing it? 2, we've got a lot of stuff that we almost leave on the table or get rid of. And the world of the old media, the world of our radio, that it happens and it's gone, that world is being turned on its head, maybe a little bit by people like me who are saying, hey, this happened, but you know what? You can go back and relive it. You can go back and revisit it. You can go back and share in it. And you can do it in the leisure of your home with a coffee with some friends, have a chat. I think it's all kind of fun. So, welcome to Remembering Dubai with Nightline, starting off with how it all happened. I'm James Pikeway. Enjoy.
That's Bon Jovi on Radio 2, 99.3 and 106. Good morning. This is the Power Breakfast, 9:16. Every Wednesday between 9 and 10, we take a look at the week that was. James Pikeway joins me from Zayed University and gives up his time absolutely free of charge. So thanks for that, James. We always appreciate hearing your insights into what's going on. And it's been a big week.
Giant. The handover.
The handover of power in Iraq. Now, they set it down for June the 30th, and they'd been talking about June the 30th for months and months and months and months. And then they spiked everyone's guns by jumping in there 2 days early and handing it over, and it was pretty much a peaceful sort of a thing.
Yeah. Done very quietly, done. Basically, I mean, this is a volatile country. Insurgents is the name of that's being used for the people who are waging really a war against the governments there, against the U.S. there, against the coalition troops there. I think they had to do this. They had to do it quickly. They had to do it under very secure circumstances, or else it was just a walking target.
I mean, the Iraqis on the ground, the people who are living in the country, let's not forget, they didn't like Paul Bremer. They didn't understand him. He didn't understand them, and they didn't like some of the decisions he'd made. Is this a case of getting Bremer out as soon as possible and getting the real administration in?
I don't think so. I think his time was up anyway. I really think this was an attempt to not have this made into some kind of a spectacle. Do this in a big, open, public way and set off a car bomb or something. I mean, that's just something that no one wanted to happen.
Yeah, but if you look at the way they did do it, they did it right in the middle of the very protected green zone in Baghdad. They kind of did it behind closed doors. It was almost like, and if you were a militant, you would think, well, they're scared.
I think they are scared. I mean, in all reality, there's up to 60 attacks a day across the country. It's hard to distinguish friend from foe. If you look at pictures and you listen to reports that are coming out from even soldiers who are there, they're saying, look, this has gone from being small attacks to very large attacks, well-organized attacks. A lot of problems used to happen at night, dusk till dawn. Now they're happening during the day. This had to be done in this manner. It's a really volatile place, and Alawi's got a lot of work to do to straighten things out.
You have to feel a little bit for Paul Bremer. I mean, he was put in there as the administrator. When he went in there, he was the man with ideas. He was the man with the plan, you know. The guy's run 20 marathons in his life. He's a hard worker. He only got just over a year to do what, for example, Douglas MacArthur in Japan got 6 years.
Exactly. And I think that's one of his biggest regrets, is that he didn't have more time and that he couldn't, in the short time that he had, affect the change that he was hoping for, such as a new constitution.
He started with a hiss and a roar, though. I mean, when he went in May, his first decisions were seen as pretty much disastrous. He tried to de-Baathistize the government, the schools, the universities, pretty much everything had all the Baathist party members taken out.
That's astounding numbers if you look at the figures. 400,000 military were let go.
They were let go, but not disarmed.
No, just let go. 10,000 teachers, 60,000 government civil servants, just let go. So this caused immense problems because it throws a big portion of the country into economic chaos, as they have no money, no job, and nothing better to do.
So Paul Bremer basically got there, made an enemy of at least 400,000 people, and let them have guns.
It's
one way of looking at it.
Yeah, that is obviously one side. Difficult situation he was in. As one of the Coalition Provisional Authority advisors has suggested, that maybe we just weren't prepared for what we were going into. And sure, there was great surveillance and great lead up to it, But once you're on the ground and once you're really looking at what's happening after this kind of a conflict, the question is, were we really prepared? And I'm sure Paul Bremer will come out with a memoir very shortly, and he'll set us straight on some of these things.
Colin Powell said right before the Iraq conflict began, before anything happened, he famously said to George Bush, "You break Iraq, you bought it." This has very much been proved to be the case.
This is a big problem. How long can people stay there? How much is it going to cost? Psychologically, physically, economically, this is, hopefully this isn't true, what you just said, but it's looking more and more that way.
Where to now for Iyad Allawi? I mean, they've announced today that Saddam Hussein's being handed over today and will effectively be charged tomorrow. They're not mucking about, are they? Is pace an issue?
It is. This has to be done. Allawi has to bring Saddam Hussein out. He has to put him in a public position so that he can show that we are doing something, that we are taking command, that we do run the country. Iraqis run Iraq. And he's got a lot on stake too, because he was out of the country since about 1970. So he's got he's really has to cement his position and show that he is speaking for Iraqis. He's got 4 things to do. He's got economics, that he has to change the situation, unemployment. He has to supply basic services. This is a really, really contentious issue. Electricity, water, etc. across the country. Unemployment at 28% right now. Security is a giant issue. Security for the common man, people who are shopping. All sorts of people are getting killed. And just, as the key word is collateral damage. Those who are innocent, children, mothers, family members. This is big. Independent judiciary. The government has to be shown as having independence and the ability to say what the laws are and enforce those laws. Again, why Saddam has to be put on trial, or at least the image of that happening. And acceleration of the process of democracy. Probably one of the hardest things he's going to have to do is put that in place and make it work.
Well, that's the 64,000 dirham question. Will it work? I guess time will tell. It's been interesting the way it's been looked at around the world by various world leaders. A lot of them seem pretty put out by the fact that at NATO, the summit of the allied members, Bush and Blair were the only ones that knew what was going on. They had that handshake, didn't they? They looked at their watches, looked at each other, shook each other's hands. The rest of the leaders sat there and went, "What?"
Yeah, this is a big problem, and NATO. This poses just significant problems for NATO, especially as Afghanistan is being talked about, and Karzai saying send in more troops. NATO, as much as it is the word that's being used is a good subcontractor for military issues. Is it really a body that could intervene in these cases? Jacques Chirac is saying, we are not going to Afghanistan. We are not going to Iraq. It just is not going to happen. This is not the role of NATO. At the end of the day, with what's going on in Iraq and with the coalition, it's a small club. It's a small club, and there are still people who are not part of this group.
Well, the NATO summit provided a few handbags at dawn type fights between some of the leaders and the media. We'll take a look at that in just a bit and look at everything else in the week that was. This is Radio 2. It's Dexys on Radio 2. This is the Power Breakfast. President Bush this week was named the best-dressed US president ever. We'll take a look at that a wee bit later on. The week that was with James Pikeway every Wednesday between 9 and 10. James, the NATO summit in Istanbul in Turkey. First of all, they were going to talk about Afghanistan, they were going to talk about Iraq and, things related to that. But then, of course, the handover of power completely gazumped everything and became the only thing to talk about.
Yeah, and we're not even getting the full story on that yet. But basically, a whole bunch of leaders there trumped on this. No one knew. It didn't leak out, which is interesting when you think about all of the people who were there and how tight the veil of secrecy is on what's going on in that country and what was going on.
Well, yeah, I mean, effectively, from what I've read, Bush and Blair knew, and they're very, very immediate workers. But, I mean, does that not say that they don't trust Germany, they don't trust France, they don't trust Russia?
That would be what one would think. There is a lot. There's a lot of problems right now going on in the international community with respect to military, with respect to friendships, with respect to protocols, and probably stretching back to the invasion of Iraq and other conflicts and who got involved. And those countries that didn't get involved, didn't put themselves on the line directly, are still paying that price.
How long are they going to pay that price for, though? I guess that's the big question.
Yeah, it's that's the $1 million question. This could be an indefinite thing. This may be a definite change in the world relationships. You've got the in group, and you've got the B tier members who are doing other peacekeeping roles and other things, and the B group is out of the loop.
If you look at that B group, though, you've got some massive countries. The entire west of Europe, essentially.
Well, and this is the big issue that we start to play out, especially when you start thinking of the EU and you start thinking of those power groups, France, Germany. They're not involved, and I would bet they're getting steamed about this.
And they're also getting more and more powerful economically. It's not going to be long before the US is only one of 2 or even 3 dogs on the block instead of the big dog.
Right, and this is the big issue that's also being played out right now. All the faithful readers of Foreign Affairs talking about big editorial this month talking about that very issue. Who are going to be the big dogs on the block? And China, the Asian countries, all jumping enormously with wealth and potentially with power, and this could eclipse a lot of what's going on. And this obviously plays into some of these issues of power that France is questioning, and that the U.S. and Britain are both saying, hey, we still control what's going on here.
Jacques Chirac made an interesting speech at NATO, pretty much a fiery speech about Bush. Bush on Monday said about Turkey that they should have a date for acceptance into the EU. He said that Turkey were a good, honest country and they should be within EU. Now, really, that's not his place to say. He's not even a member of the EU. And Jacques Chirac, quite rightly, I thought, pointed that out and said, well, that's kind of like us telling you how to deal with Mexico.
Yeah, there's really a lot of issues between the U.S. and France. Another nice quote that came out from Jacques Chirac. It says that we're friends, we're allies, but we are not servants. And he went on, and that was in that exchange. Just you would like to be a fly on the wall. You would really like to hear what these people are saying out of camera, off of the microphones, and how they're talking to each other behind closed doors. And clearly they are not friends.
It is unusual, isn't it, for someone like France and the US, for them to be so, well, let's face it, openly hostile. I mean, there haven't been many occasions in the last 20 years where allies have been so completely at odds with each other.
Correct. And it's not getting any better. And it seemed like it was warming up. A couple months ago, they were talking a little friendly,er
and then at the D-Day ceremonies as well.
Yeah, things were looking better. And suddenly it's taken a turn for the worse yet again. I would suggest all going back to the original UN resolutions and going into Iraq. France said no, and they're paying that price dearly.
It seems to be only France, though. I mean, you've noticed a complete lack of noise from, say, Italy, from Germany, from Spain as well, and just quietly Portugal's Prime Minister.
Even though they pulled out, even though some countries have pulled out, they did get involved, and these countries are playing it safe. They're saying, hey, you know what? At the end of the day, there's money to be had in the restructuring of the country, and they want to be involved in that. And Canada has paid a little bit of a price for not getting involved and been told that, hey, you know what? You will not play a role in the restructuring of this country. And France has been given a similar nod that when it comes to contracts, you won't be involved directly. The countries that were involved in bringing some peace and order, or at least getting rid of Saddam Hussein, will be involved. And the scars are very deep. The scars are deep.
Well, it's obviously something that's going to take a while to sort out if it does get sorted out. Meanwhile, the EU's getting more and more powerful. They're going to have more members as the Croatias of the world get voted in, and Turkey, for example.
Yeah, sure.
I thought it was quite interesting that Chirac equated Turkey with Mexico. I thought that was a bit harsh, perhaps.
I can imagine that he's not winning any friends anywhere right now, Jacques Chirac.
Secretary of State Colin Powell has arrived in Khartoum this morning. So has Kofi Annan, the UN Secretary General. They've sent in the big guns, finally, to try and sort out what's going on in Darfur. Meanwhile, the headlines have been in the papers for, 3 months now?
It's all talk. It's becoming, from my perspective, it reminds me of the lead up to the war. We're talking. It's time to act.
We'll take a look at that in just a bit. This is the week that was. Phone number 600-1402, by the way. This is Avril Lavigne. That's Avril Lavigne. It's 9:39. Expect 42 degrees today. Hot and humid nights as well. 30-degree lows and 75% humidity tonight. The week that was, James Pikeway from Zayed University. Every Wednesday we take a look at the week that was. Bit of a break now. This is the last one while James goes off on a regular and well-deserved break. I guess that's what it's called.
Yes, back to Canada. Hit south of France on the way back to the UAE.
Speaking of Canada, I have to bring this up. I'm only going to do this once, all right? But earlier in the week, the Canadian general election, on the ballots was printed, "Do not eat this ballot."
Canadians are a hungry lot.
Do not eat your voting paper? Good grief.
Covering all bases. Canadians always make sure that everyone is aware of what can and cannot be done.
Are very thorough people.
Yes, very thorough.
Presumably it was just below, "Do not bring your crocodile into the voting booth."
Well, but let's just touch on this really quickly. The Canadian election got done. It's finished. A lot of people not happy. A lot of people, as in around the world with elections, did not vote. They were saying this was one of the smallest, I have some stats here somewhere, one of the weakest turnouts ever. 60.5% of the electorate cast ballots, 13.5% of 22.3 million people, 13.5 million of 22.3 eligible voters voted. So this was terrible. Canadians are saying this was awful.
60% though, I mean, by Western standards, that's actually not a bad turnout.
Oh, no, it's a great turnout. And if you compare and go back and look, say, at presidential elections in the U.S. and other countries, this is a great turnout. And this is one of the lowest turnouts since 18-something or other, and this was a prohibition referendum that got less people.
Wow.
So, but still, people are not out voting, and it was an interesting election. So I guess the issue being they don't want people eating their ballots to voice their disapproval.
Well, they've done the hard work and got them in there.
Yeah.
They're one of the 60%, so they may as well cast their votes. Yes, anyway, Darfur. Okay, this has been a big story for the last
it's
couple of months.
ongoing. It's continuing. We're talking at least the last 2 months. We've sat here and spoken about it, sometimes on air, most of the time off.
The background, I mean, the UN aid organization has said that as many as 3 million people are being displaced.
Yeah.
At least 1 million people are in danger from famine and from plague. And it's been exacerbated by the fact that these militia are stonking around killing off refugees.
Right, and so the aid agencies cannot get in or are too worried about going in. And when they do get in, there's no one around, or people are running scared and don't know who to trust. Yes, and questions about who else is assisting which neighboring countries. There has been whispers of Rwanda and other groups having militias involved in this, and of course that is denied.
Rwanda, of course, being where the last of these situations played out in the early 90s.
Exactly, and the UN has to be looking at this, and the United States and other countries, NATO, in fact, has to be looking at this, saying, what do we do? Problem being, sending in troops is a big issue. How do you send in troops?
And then, more importantly, how do you get them back out
How to get them out, exactly. How long will they have to stay there? What are they going to do? There's a peacekeeping group there right now, really observers, a very small contingent of UN representatives, and they don't have the mandate to fight.
It's interesting. Today in Khartoum, Secretary of State of the United States, Colin Powell's arrived. The Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, has arrived. They're sending in the big guns to do a lot of talking, but the UN have already said, we're not going to send troops in. Don't be silly.
No. This is a big issue. So what exactly are they going to do? And what can they do? What do they want to do? Of course, there's a whole cynical side of this saying, well, there's no oil, there's no natural resources there. Why should we care?
Well, it doesn't even seem like the Sudanese government care too much. Sudanese Foreign Minister Mustafa Ismail said at a news conference this morning, well, there is a problem in Darfur, but it's been exaggerated.
Yes.
All right. Okay, well, that's there's no famine, apparently, no epidemic, and no humanitarian problem.
The other problem is getting media in there to take a look at it, to report it, to put it onto the pages of newspapers, and there's very, very few media people there. It's a dangerous place. The other issue being that media representatives are spread out amongst other issues and conflicts that are going on around the world, so it's hitting summer. This is just a really difficult time. And how do you get the voice out? How do you get the information out? How do you get the pictures out to avoid, as you said, another Rwanda?
Well, one of the key demands Powell has made, he's made 3 key demands to the Khartoum government this morning. He says Sudan must rein in the Arab militia, must start negotiations with ethnic minorities in Darfur, and humanitarian agencies must be given full access with observers. So this is what we're talking about. You can't just sort of hope that it's going to be looked after by that government, particularly if those comments can be listened to.
No, and I think that's probably the number one issue is the on the backside is the humanitarian aid workers who need to get in there, who need to start doing what they do, getting food, getting shelter, getting medical assistance, setting up schools, setting up refugee camps, just basically providing the general necessities for life. And they're not doing that because they can't get in there. And to me, that would probably be where the UN and the US right now are trying to weigh pressure and saying, look, there is money, not a lot, but there is money, and it needs to be delivered in a timely and quick fashion.
If you look at the statistics since the outbreak of hostilities in Iraq, about 11,000 civilians have died in Iraq. Since February last year in Darfur, at least 10,000 have died there. So it's a similar scale.
Yeah, the numbers are staggering. And they're just not being reported. I think when you put it into perspective and people look at this, the average folks, you and I, look at this, it can't help but affect you. Although this is the other side of the story when we talk about media, is that whole desensitization. And so we hear 10,000 people, or worse, you hear 200 people died in a family. You say, oh, only 200? That's not very many.
Yeah, it's just a plane crash.
Yeah. 10,000 people there, 10,000 people here. Oh, that's not too many. Until you can put faces on it, or you start saying, well, this is 10,000 people is the size of the village that I come from, or the town that I come from, or 10,000 people. It starts to make sense when it's one of your neighbors or a friend or someone you know, and that changes everything. But it's getting this message out, and before it's too late.
Bob Geldof, come back. Your time is now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a Live Aid thing is needed again.
Paul Simon up next on Radio 2. This is The Week That Was. James Pikeaway from Zayed University and joins me every Wednesday. You're also welcome to make your comments. powerbreakfast@hotmail's my email address. We'll wrap up some of the smaller stories from around the world next. It's Paul Simon, 9:53. I'll have news for you at 10 o'clock. Then Tanya's got lifestyle. Taking a look this afternoon at travel and the summer getaways that you want to be on. More on that a wee bit later on lifestyle with Tanya Burgess. Well, the week that was with James Pikeaway, and just about our lot for the week. But obviously there have been more than just the big stories. The smaller stories have snuck in there. George W. Bush. Now, I know I pick on President Bush a lot, but this one really jumped out at me. He was in Ireland for a summit there, staying at a castle, Dolomud Castle. He got photographed in his vest, pulling the curtains to go to bed. Yeah. He then turns around and bans media, including the television and the newspapers, from publishing the photo.
Yeah. Image is everything, Schroeder.
Yeah, but how can he do that? This is the country from free speech.
You can try. Anyone can try. I mean, take it just for a second. Consider all of the images you've seen of President George Bush Jr. What have you seen? You've seen him. He's fat. He dresses very well. Suits. You see him in his designer polo shirts. You see him in his button-up shirts.
Or on the farm in his denim and denim.
And denim and denim. But the image is very, very important. If he has learned nothing from Ronald Reagan, he's learned that image is everything.
It was amazing, though. I mean, the US TV networks, NBC, CBS, they all said, okay, we won't do that. Sky News and the BBC in England, okay, we won't show it. The only papers that published this photo, The Star on Sunday and Ireland on Sunday, along with editorials saying, well, you can't stop us. It wasn't that big a deal. It was just a picture of him in a T-shirt.
Yeah. It could go back in a way to how the picture was obtained. A private moment. Privacy is privacy. Is it worth showing? What are we gaining from it? This is as a man who they need to have some downtime, the politicians, and so give him his downtime.
I quite agree with that. It's Just that censorship thing that really sticks in my craw. I couldn't quite believe that when I read that.
I mean, of course, everyone could have published it if they wanted to, so they're exercising some self-restraint if they want. I mean, it opens up the door, I suppose, that anyone, if it was you or I, and someone decided they wanted to have a picture like this, I can't imagine why they'd want a picture of you or I, but if they wanted to and we said, no, please don't, at least they might consider it.
You would hope that they would.
Hope.
Fair enough. Interesting interview in the Time magazine this week. Bill Clinton on George Bush, amongst other things. He says at some point, well, let's be fair here. If you'd been president, you'd think, well, this fellow bin Laden just turned these 3 airplanes into weapons of mass destruction. So you're sitting there as president, you're reading in the aftermath, so yeah, you're going to go get them. You're going to go into Afghanistan, and you're probably going to go into Iraq and try and find those weapons. Clinton, in effect, in a very, very circuitous route, said that Bush was pretty much right to do what he did, but wrong at the wrong time.
Yeah, timing is everything, of course. But looking at it, I can't imagine that any of the former presidents who are watching what George Bush is doing today are saying, would we have done anything differently? Something had to be done. Action had to be taken.
Well, even John Kerry, the challenger, has said, well, no, I can't dispute anything.
Exactly. And John Kerry said, well, what would I change? He would do very, very small changes in the veneer of what's happening. Major changes wouldn't come about. Why? Because the path that has to be followed is set out. It has to be done. It's an interesting situation looking at what Bill Clinton was saying and the stance that he was taking and clearly what is being done and the way presidents look at each other. He obviously has some insight into what is going on.
There's also no one nicer than a former president. There's no point getting anyone's back up anymore. You're out of the game.
I suppose. And you could always come back and do something such as Jimmy Carter with humanitarian aid. And you want to maintain some objectivity so that you can maybe be someone who can help out in a situation such as Afghanistan. Maybe Clinton will be the person to go in and help broker some kind of an agreement there.
The other thing that made the headlines this week, I guess, Michael Moore's new documentary movie went straight to number 1 at the US box office. Despite being given an R rating, Fahrenheit 9/11 took $22 million at the box office, a record for a documentary, and in an election year, well, that might yet have quite an influence.
Well, I wonder about that. Christian Science Monitor is suggesting that, at the end of the day, who's going to go see this movie? And with the undecided voters, what are we talking about? And they're suggesting in polls that they're quoting that maybe 1% of the electorate will be swayed by Michael Moore's movie, which, though, in the case of the presidential elections,
would have turned the last one.
Well, it could be a lot of people. Very, very weak numbers with respect to turnout in those elections. I think it's more interesting when we talk about Michael Moore and even Bill Clinton is that both of these gentlemen have got materials out there. The film obviously is the greatest op-ed piece that's being used right now on the Bush administration, and it's really overshadowing what both Kerry and what Bush did on Wednesday. Nice piece here that Senator John Kerry, no one noticed that the Democratic challenger for the presidency flew 3,910 miles on Tuesday to cast a vote in Washington on veterans health care and then didn't get to vote after all because of procedural delays, or that Bush delivered a major speech on AIDS in Philadelphia on Wednesday, neither of which were reported. And these are very significant things.
In an election year, these guys like to get as much as they can, which is the main reason they're so annoyed with Clinton and Michael Moore.
Yeah, definitely.
The week that was takes a break for a couple of weeks now. James is off for a well-deserved break. And thanks for your time once again, James.
Thank you, Schroeder.
We'll see you in a few weeks. Enjoy your holiday.
Great, bye.